We didn't need his little handouts. My husband's father laughed when I offered to help. In front of everyone, he mocked me and bragged about his $53 million company. I felt the sting, but I stayed calm. I sent my advisor a quick text: pull every dollar from Parker Group. Their panic meeting began minutes later. We don't need your little handouts of advice. Adam Parker's words hung in the air like poison. The entire table went silent. His wife Vivian smiled that practiced smile wealthy women perfect over decades. Zachary, my husband, looked down at his plate and said nothing. His sister Emma smirked behind her napkin. His brother Noah suddenly found his wine glass fascinating. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here and sharing these stories about claiming your worth. If you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their background, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Now let's see what happened next. I just spent 20 minutes explaining why their $53 million company was about to collapse. I'd shown them the numbers, the leverage ratios, the debt coverage that was trending toward disaster. I tried to help them. And Adam had laughed in my face. We have analysts from Wharton and Columbia, he continued, reaching for his wine like this was all very amusing. We don't need your little handouts. I set down my fork carefully. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I thought they would be. What Adam Parker didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't the poor girl from nowhere they'd been tolerating for 5 years. I was the invisible investor keeping their empire standing. Every loan, every credit facility, every dollar that kept their commercial properties afloat, it all traced back to me. $38 million of my money was holding up their $53 million empire. And I was about to pull every cent of it. I reached into my purse for my phone. Excuse me, I said quietly. I need to make a call. Adam looked pleased, like I'd finally learned my place. Of course. Business calls, even for small consulting firms. I walked through their sprawling home, 8,000 square feet of marble floors and imported furniture, and locked myself in Adam's study. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled up my encrypted messaging app and found Marcus Brennan, my investment advisor. My thumb hovered over the screen for maybe 3 seconds. Not because I was uncertain, but because I was thinking about how I'd gotten here. How a girl from Corpus Christi who used to hide her free lunch card had ended up holding the fate of a $53 million empire in her hands. I typed. Execute full withdrawal from Parker Group. All facilities. Immediate effect. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Marcus knew exactly what this meant. That's $38 million across 7 facilities. This triggers cross-default clauses on their external debt. They're looking at $61 million in immediate obligations with maybe $9 million in liquid assets. I know. Sophia, are you sure? This is nuclear. I thought about Adam's laugh. About Zachary's silence. About 5 years of being treated like a charity case who should be grateful for scraps of acceptance. I've never been more sure. And Marcus, make sure Adam gets the notifications directly. I want him to see it tonight. Understood. Dorothy would be proud. I stared at that message. Dorothy. God, I wish she could see this. But she'd prepared me for it. She'd seen it coming years before I did. Dorothy Whitmore had been 82 years old when she walked into my tiny office on a Tuesday afternoon 6 years ago. I was 24, drowning in student loan debt, running a struggling financial consulting firm out of a converted storage room in South Austin. I had 3 clients, all of them small businesses barely scraping by, and I was 1 bad month away from losing everything. Dorothy wore a crisp linen suit and had white hair cut sharp as a blade. She sat across from my second-hand desk and said, Mrs. Chin speaks very highly of you. I need someone to review my estate planning. I'd almost said no. I'd never worked with someone that wealthy. I could tell just by looking at her. The way she carried herself, the quality of her clothes, the weight of old money that didn't need to announce itself. But I needed the work. So I said yes. What I didn't know then was that Dorothy wasn't just looking for an estate planner. She was looking for someone like her. Someone who'd grown up with nothing. Someone who understood what money actually meant. Tell me about yourself, she'd said during that first meeting. So I did. I told her about growing up in Corpus Christi, about my mother who cleaned houses for wealthy families on the north side of town, About my father who drove trucks until the accident left him disabled when I was 9. I told her about learning to calculate the cost of everything. Generic cereal versus name brand thrift store clothes. The free lunch card I'd hide in my palm so the other kids wouldn't see. Dorothy had listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. Good, she said. You know what money actually means. Most people born with it never learn. She hired me. Then she did something I never expected. She mentored me. For 3 years, Dorothy taught me everything. Not just about finance, though she was brilliant at that. She'd made her fortune in West Texas oil fields in the 1960s. A woman in a man's world who'd learned to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone expected. But she taught me about power too. About strategy. About invisibility as a weapon. The most dangerous people in any room, she told me once, are the ones everyone underestimates. Learn to be underestimated, Sophia. Let them think you're small. Let them think you're insignificant. Then show them what it costs when they're wrong. I hadn't understood what she meant. Not really. Not until later. Dorothy died 3 years after we met. Pancreatic cancer, quick and brutal. She left me everything, $48 million in trusts and LLCs and investment vehicles so complex that even forensic accountants couldn't trace them all back to me. She left me a handwritten note too on her personal stationery. Asterisk, don't make my mistake. Don't spend your life proving you belong. Let them underestimate you. Then show them what it costs. Sis. I'd cried when I read it. Not just because she was gone, but because I still didn't fully understand what she was trying to tell me. I understood now. I'd grown up in a neighborhood in Corpus Christi where the paint peeled off houses like sunburned skin. Where my mother came home exhausted every evening, carrying Tupperware containers filled with leftovers from the families she cleaned for. Half a casserole, leftover roast chicken, things they'd throw away otherwise. She'd wash those containers carefully and return them the next day, and I'd pretend not to notice the humiliation in the way she never quite met their eyes. My father's disability check was $1,100 a month. It had to cover rent, utilities, food, his pain medication, everything. I learned to manage our finances when I was 15 years old. I found tax credits my parents didn't know existed. I called the electric company to negotiate payment plans. I discovered that if you asked the right questions in the right tone, polite but firm, respectful but persistent, even people whose job was to say no would sometimes say yes. I had a gift for numbers. For seeing patterns. For understanding how money moved and where it leaked. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Chin, noticed. She called me into her office during my junior year and said, "Sophia, you're too smart to stay stuck here. Have you thought about college?" I hadn't. College was for other people. People whose parents could help with applications, who didn't need to work 30 hours a week just to keep the lights on. But Mrs. Chin was relentless. He helped me apply to UT Austin. She helped me write scholarship essays, stayed late 3 nights a week to review them with me. When the acceptance letter came, full scholarship, room and board included, I stood in our tiny kitchen and cried. Mama held me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. For the first time in my life I felt like maybe I wasn't invisible. College was different. UT Austin was full of students who'd gone to private schools, whose parents were doctors and lawyers, who talked casually about spring breaks in Cabo and summer internships arranged with a single phone call. I worked 3 part-time jobs. I studied in library bathrooms between shifts. I graduated with honors in finance and $60,000 in student loan debt. I started my consulting firm because I couldn't afford to take an unpaid internship at a big firm. It barely kept me afloat. I lived in a studio apartment with a Murphy bed that didn't fold up right. I ate ramen more nights than I care to remember. Then Dorothy walked into my life and changed everything. She'd been Mrs. Chen's college roommate decades ago. When Mrs. Chen told her about me, Dorothy came to see for herself. She mentored me. She invested in me. And when she died, she left me everything. $48 million that no one knew about. I kept it hidden when I met Zachary Parker 2 years later at a charity fundraiser. I wanted to know if he'd love me for who I was, not what I had. I thought if his family accepted me without knowing about the money, it would mean something real. I'd been so naive. My phone buzzed in my hand. Marcus, asterisk done. Notifications sent. Processing will complete in 12 minutes. Asterisk. 12 minutes until their world ended. I stood in Adam Parker's study, surrounded by photographs of his business triumphs, his framed deals, his monuments to himself. There wasn't a single photo of his children. Not one picture of Zachary or Emma or Noah. Just Adam's empire displayed like trophies. I thought about Dorothy's note. About invisibility as a weapon. About being underestimated. I thought about 5 years of Sunday dinners where I'd made myself small, where I'd stayed quiet, where I'd let them dismiss me and mock me and treat me like I should be grateful they'd let me into their world. They'd called my insights little handouts. They were about to learn what real handouts looked like. I checked my reflection in the window, smoothed my dress, steadied my breathing, and walked back to the dining table. 8 minutes left. I returned to the dining room and slid back into my chair. The salmon on my plate had gone cold, but I cut into it anyway, my movements deliberate and calm. Around me, conversation continued like nothing had changed. Emma was telling some story about a boutique opening in River Oaks. Noah was refilling his wine glass. Vivian was nodding along with that practiced interest wealthy women use when they're not really listening. Zachary glanced at me. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just work." He smiled and turned back to his brother. He didn't ask what kind of work. He never did. I counted down in my head. 7 minutes left. It's strange how clearly you can see the truth when you finally stop looking away from it. Sitting there at that table watching Zachary laugh at his father's jokes, I could pinpoint the exact moment I should have known this would never work. It was our wedding day. We'd gotten married on a beach in Port Aransas. Small ceremony, just family, the way Zachary had wanted it. His mother Vivian had kissed my cheek and said, "Welcome to the family, dear," in a tone that sounded more like condolence than congratulation. His father Adam had shaken my hand with a grip that lasted half a second too short, like he was touching something unpleasant. His sister Emma had barely looked at me. His brother Noah had asked what I did for a living, and when I said financial consulting, he'd smiled like I'd told a joke. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself they'd warm up eventually. I told myself Zachary loved me and that was enough. God, I'd been so naive. I met Zachary 2 years after Dorothy died at a charity fundraiser I almost didn't attend. It was one of those black tie events where tickets cost more than I used to make in a month. My consulting firm had been hired to advise the organization on financial planning, so I was invited. I'd stood in my closet for an hour trying to figure out what to wear. Everything I owned felt wrong. Too cheap, too plain, too obviously not from the right stores. I finally settled on a simple black dress from Marshall's that had cost $40 and made me feel like an imposter. The venue was the Four Seasons. Crystal chandeliers. String quartet. Women in gowns that cost more than my monthly rent. I'd gotten a glass of wine from the bar and was calculating how soon I could leave without being rude when Zachary approached me. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he'd said, smiling. I'd almost lied. Almost given him the polite response. But something about his smile made me honest. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. He'd extended his hand. Zachary Parker. He was handsome, dark hair, easy smile, the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. But he didn't seem to notice my cheap dress or my Target heels. He asked about my work. Actually listened when I talked about financial consulting, about helping small businesses manage cash flow and plan for growth. He laughed at my jokes. He told me his family owned a commercial real estate company, but he didn't brag about it. Kind. Genuine. Different from the men I usually met who wanted to know what I could do for them before they'd give me 5 minutes of their time. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him. When he called the next day, I said yes to dinner. I didn't know I was saying yes to 5 years of slow-motion heartbreak. The first year was perfect, or I thought it was. Zachary took me to nice restaurants but never made me feel like I didn't belong there. He asked about my childhood, my parents, seemed genuinely interested in where I came from. He didn't flinch when I told him about the thrift store clothes and the free lunch card. He said it made him respect me more, that I'd built something from nothing. I believed him. God, I believed him. I kept my wealth hidden. Dorothy's fortune stayed invisible, locked in trusts and investment vehicles so complex that even Zachary's family's accountants wouldn't spot them. I wanted him to love me for me, not for what I had. I wanted to know if this was real. Looking back, I can see all the signs I missed. The way he'd casually mention his family's wealth, not bragging exactly, but making sure I understood the world he came from. The way he'd pick up every check without asking if I wanted to split it, like the idea of me paying was absurd. The way he'd introduce me to his friends. "This is Sophia. She's a financial consultant." She's brilliant. Built her own business from scratch. Always emphasizing the from scratch part like it was the most interesting thing about me. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself he was just proud of me. I told myself this was what love looked like. Someone who saw past my background and loved me anyway. The word, anyway, should have been my first clue. We got engaged after 8 months. Married 6 months after that. His family was polite at the wedding but distant, like they were attending out of obligation rather than joy. I'd invited my mother, who'd worn her nicest dress and cried through the entire ceremony. I'd invited Mrs. Chen, my high school guidance counselor, who'd hugged me so tight afterward and whispered, "Dorothy would be so proud." I'd invited the handful of friends I'd made in college and through my consulting work. People who knew me really knew me. Zachary's side of the aisle was 3 times the size of mine. Extended family, business associates, friends from prep school and college. They'd smiled politely when introduced to my guests. Made small talk that felt more like ethnographic research than genuine interest. After the wedding, things started changing. Slowly. Subtly. It wasn't dramatic. It was erosion. The way water wears down stones so gradually you don't notice until there's a canyon. Zachary started mentioning how his father had built Parker Group from the ground up, how brilliant Adam was, how I could learn a lot from him. He suggested I stop driving my 10-year-old Camry, said it didn't look professional, that his family could help me lease something nicer. I told him I liked my car. It had been my grandmother's, one of the few things I had left from her. He'd smiled indulgently and said, "Of course, but perception matters in business, sophomore." He started picking out my outfits for family dinners. Nothing cruel, just helpful suggestions that felt more like corrections. Maybe wear the blue dress instead of the black one. It's more cheerful. Those earrings are nice, but these would look better with that outfit. I told myself he was trying to help, that he knew his family better than I did. When I'd offer opinions about business or finance, my actual area of expertise, he'd smile and say, "You're smart, Soph, but this is a different level." Different level. Like I was playing junior varsity while his family was in the pros. He started repeating his father's phrases. Big picture thinking. Real money. Strategic vision. Words that meant nothing but sounded important. He told his parents everything, what I said, what I worried about, what I dreamed about. I'd hear it echo back at Sunday dinners in Adam's voice, twisted into punchlines that made everyone laugh except me. I felt myself shrinking. Becoming smaller. Quieter. The girl who'd managed her family's finances at 15, who'd graduated with honors from UT Austin, who'd built a consulting firm from nothing. She was disappearing and I didn't know how to stop it. The Sunday dinners were the worst. Every week we'd drive to the Parker estate in Zachary's BMW. He'd stopped letting me drive anywhere we went together, said it was easier if he drove. The house was 8,000 square feet of marble and crystal, the kind that appeared in architecture magazines. Vivian would serve elaborate meals prepared by a chef whose name she never mentioned, served by staff who were even more invisible than I was. Adam would hold court at the head of the table, telling stories about business victories, about competitors he'd crushed, about deals he'd won through what he called strategic maneuvering, and what I recognized as borderline predatory lending practices. Emma and Noah would laugh on cue, performing their roles as dutiful children. Zachary would nod along, seeking his father's approval in every gesture. And I would sit there, invisible, until someone remembered I existed. "Sophia, dear, do you understand how commercial real estate works?" Vivian had asked once, her tone dripping with gentle condescension. "Sophia, have you ever been to the Hamptons?" Emma had asked another time, knowing full well I hadn't. "Sophia, that's a lovely dress. Is it from Target?" Noah had asked, and everyone had laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. Always with smiles. Always with kindness in their voices. But I felt every word like a paper cut, small and stinging, adding up to something that bled. I stopped offering opinions. I stopped talking unless directly asked. I became a ghost at their table. And no one noticed except me. 5 minutes left. Adam's phone started buzzing against the table. Once. Twice. Then it rang. A sharp, insistent sound that cut through Emma's story mid-sentence. He frowned at the screen. "Terrence," he said, identifying his CFO. "This better be important." He stood and walked toward the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. I watched him go. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. Zachary was still laughing at something Noah had said, completely oblivious. In the hallway, I heard Adam's voice change. What? No, that can't be right. Check again. Vivian's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. What do you mean withdrawn? Adam's voice was louder now, strained. All of it. The table went silent. I cut another piece of salmon and took a bite. Tasted like absolutely nothing. Adam appeared in the doorway, his face drained of color. The phone was still pressed to his ear, but his hand had gone slack. For the first time in 5 years, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Dad. Noah said, setting down his wine glass. What's wrong? Adam didn't answer immediately. He was staring at nothing, processing something his mind couldn't quite accept. Finally, he lowered the phone. Someone just pulled Whitmore Capital's entire investment from Parker Group, he said, his voice hollow. $38 million. Effective immediately. The room exploded. Whitmore Capital? Emma's voice pitched higher. That's our primary credit facility. Without that, we can't cover the Dallas portfolio closing. Noah started. The debt service on the Houston properties alone. Zachary looked genuinely panicked. Vivian's hand went to her throat, her fingers finding the pearl necklace there like a lifeline. I took another bite of salmon. Chewed slowly. Swallowed. Adam's eyes swept the room, landing on each family member in turn, looking for answers, for explanations, for someone to tell him this was a mistake. Then his gaze found mine. Really found mine. And I watched the realization dawn across his face like a sunrise. Who controls Whitmore Capital? He asked slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. I set down my fork with deliberate care. The crystal clinked softly against the china. In the silence, it sounded like a gunshot. I do, I said calmly. Along with several other investment vehicles that you're about to become very familiar with. The silence that followed was absolute. Zachary's mouth opened, but no words came out. Emma's face had gone pale. Noah looked between me and his father like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. Vivian's hand was still at her throat, frozen. You. Adam's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. You what? I own Whitmore Capital Holdings, I said, my voice steady and clear. The silent investment fund that's been financing Parker Group for the past 5 years. The bridge financing for the Dallas acquisition. The credit facility for your Houston properties. The operational capital that's been covering your cash flow gaps. All of it. Mine. I'd been reviewing their financials for 3 months before tonight. It had started innocently enough. Zachary had left a quarterly report on his desk at the condo, and I'd glanced at it while waiting for him to get ready for dinner. What I saw made my stomach drop. The leverage ratios were catastrophic. The debt service coverage was barely above water. They'd acquired a struggling commercial property portfolio in Dallas using bridge financing that was coming due in 6 months, and they didn't have the liquidity to cover it. But what made me physically ill was recognizing the primary lender's name, Whitmore Capital Holdings. My company. The investment vehicle I'd structured with Marcus after Dorothy died. They didn't know it was mine. I'd been unknowingly propping up the Parker empire for years. Every snide comment about my little consulting business. Every dismissal of my opinions. Every humiliation at this table. All of it funded by my silence and my money. I'd felt sick. But I'd also felt something else. A cold, calculating curiosity. So I dug deeper. I'd pulled records through Marcus. I'd analyzed cash flows and debt structures and corporate filings. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Parker Group wasn't a $53 million empire. It was a house of cards built on $38 million of my capital, with another $23 million in external debt they were juggling desperately. Without my money, they were bankrupt. They just didn't know it yet. I told myself I was being paranoid. That surely if I showed them I understood their business, if I demonstrated my value, they'd finally respect me. So tonight I'd brought printed analysis to dinner. I'd highlighted the critical points, prepared talking points, rehearsed how to present it without sounding condescending. My hands had shaken as I'd waited for the right moment. It had come during dessert, when Adam was complaining about how hard it was to find competent financial advisors these days. Actually, I'd said, my voice smaller than I'd intended, I've been looking at the quarterly reports and I think there might be some structural issues we should discuss. The table had gone silent. Zachary's face had flushed red. "Sophia," he'd said quietly, a warning in his tone. But I kept going. I'd explained the leverage ratios, the debt coverage, the liquidity crisis brewing beneath their perfect facade. I tried to be helpful, not critical. I tried to show I understood. Adam had listened with an expression I couldn't read. Then he'd started laughing. That horrible, dismissive laugh that made me feel 6 inches tall. "We don't need your little handouts of advice." Those words. God, those words. They'd hung in the air like poison. Adam had smiled at me like I was a child who'd said something unintentionally hilarious. The table had erupted in polite laughter. Emma covering her mouth. Noah grinning into his wine glass. Vivian offering that sympathetic smile I'd learned to hate. And Zachary had just looked down at his plate and said nothing. That silence had broken something in me. Not dramatically. Not with anger or tears or shouting. Cleanly. Like a bone snapping. I'd looked around that table and finally seen the truth I'd been avoiding for 5 years. I would never be one of them. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they needed me not to be. They needed someone to look down on, someone to make jokes about, someone who made them feel generous and enlightened for including her. That's when I'd excused myself and walked to Adam's study. That's when I'd sent the message to Marcus. And now, sitting here watching them process what I'd done, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just a strange, hollow calm. "That's impossible," Adam said finally, his voice shaking. "You're a small-time consultant. You don't have that kind of capital." "I inherited $48 million 6 years ago," I interrupted. "From my mentor, Dorothy Whitmore. Before I met Zachary. I kept it quiet because I wanted to know if your family would accept me without it." I looked around the table. Turns out the answer was no. "Sophia," Zachary found his voice finally, desperate and confused. "I don't understand. Why wouldn't you tell me? I'm your husband." "Are you?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. "When's my mother's birthday, Zachary?" Silence. "What's the name of the hospice where my father died?" "You gave a speech at his funeral. A beautiful speech about family and loss. What was the hospice called?" More silence. His face had gone white. "My mother's name is Rita. Her birthday is April 7th. My father died at Seaside Palliative Care 3 years ago." My voice was steady, almost gentle. "You never remembered because you never cared enough to listen. None of you did." I stood up, my chair scraping against the marble floor. I pulled off my wedding ring, the one Vivian had chosen because she deemed my taste a bit pedestrian, and set it on the white tablecloth beside my plate. "For 5 years I've sat at this table and made myself invisible," I said quietly. "I've listened to you mock my background, dismiss my opinions, treat me like a charity case who should be grateful you let me into your world. I've watched my husband choose your approval over my dignity again and again and again." Adam's phone started buzzing on the table. Emergency notifications. Default alerts. The beginning of the end. "You told me you don't need my little handouts," I said, meeting Adam's eyes. "So I'm taking them back. All of them. You have about 40 minutes before your emergency board meeting starts. I'd suggest you use that time wisely." "Sophia, wait." Vivian stood up, her voice trembling. "Please. Think about what you're doing. Think about your marriage. Your future." "I have been thinking about my future," I said. "For 5 years I've thought about how to earn your respect, your acceptance, your basic human decency. I'm done thinking about it. I'm done performing for people who'll never see me as anything more than the poor girl who got lucky." I picked up my purse and walked toward the entry hall. Behind me I heard chairs scraping. Voices rising. Adam barking orders into his phone. Zachary calling my name. I didn't turn around. I walked out into the November night, got into my Camry, the one they'd always been embarrassed by, and drove away. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the end of their street. I turned it off. The highway stretched out before me, empty and dark. I drove with the windows down, letting the November air wash over me. It smelled like mesquite and exhaust and freedom. My hands were steady on the wheel. My breathing was even. I wasn't crying. That surprised me most of all. I'd imagined this moment so many times over the past 3 months, since I'd first discovered that my money was propping up their empire. I'd imagined rage. Tears. The satisfying rush of vindication. But sitting there in my grandmother's old Camry driving away from the Parker estate, I felt none of those things. I just felt quiet. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Zachary calling. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it started again. Adam this time. Then Vivian. Then Emma. I watched the screen light up over and over, a desperate chorus of names I didn't want to hear from. I turned the phone face down and kept driving. The apartment in Montrose was dark when I got home. I'd kept this place through the entire marriage. A modest 2-bedroom I'd rented before I met Zachary. He'd never understood why I needed it. We have the condo downtown, he'd said. Why pay rent on a place you never use? But I'd insisted. Called it my office space. My place to work when I needed quiet. The truth was simpler. I'd needed somewhere that was mine. Somewhere that had nothing to do with the Parkers or their world or the person I was becoming in their orbit. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled stale. I'd only been here twice in the past month. I dropped my purse on the small dining table and walked to the window. The city spread out below. Not Houston's gleaming downtown towers, but the lived-in neighborhoods where real people made real lives. Bungalows with mismatched paint. Corner stores with flickering neon signs. The kind of place I'd grown up in. I made tea because I didn't know what else to do. Stood in my tiny kitchen waiting for the water to boil, staring at the chipped countertop I'd never bothered to replace. This apartment cost $800 a month. The Parker estate's property taxes were more than that per week. My phone buzzed with a text. I almost didn't look, but something made me check. Marcus, board meeting underway. It's bad. Do you want details? I stared at that message for a long moment. Did I want details? Did I want to know exactly how their world was ending? As I typed back, 3 dots appeared. Then a wall of text. Emergency board meeting started at 10:47 p.m. All directors present plus legal counsel. CFO Terrence Walsh presented the situation. $38 million withdrawn from Whitmore Capital effective immediately. This triggers cross-default clauses on $23 million in external debt from 3 separate lenders. Total immediate obligations, approximately $61 million. Current liquid assets, $9.2 million. They're exploring emergency financing options, but no bank will touch them with this debt-to-asset ratio. Unanimous vote to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection first thing Monday morning. Adam tried to block it. Was outvoted 6-1. I read it twice. Then a third time. Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. The word felt surreal. Another text from Marcus. Adam had personally guaranteed some of the corporate debt. If Parker Group goes down, he's personally liable for approximately $12 million. He could lose everything. The house, the cars, possibly even personal accounts depending on how creditors pursue collection. I set the phone down. Picked up my tea. Took a sip. It burned my tongue. Everything. Adam Parker could lose everything. I waited for the satisfaction to come. The sense of justice served. The feeling that Dorothy would call righteous vindication. It didn't come. I just felt tired. My phone rang. Zachary again. This time I answered. Sophia. His voice was wrecked. Bro. Sophia, please. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. You just destroyed my family. No, I interrupted. I withdrew my investment from a company I had every legal right to exit. Your family destroyed themselves by building an empire on capital they didn't control. That's semantics. That's reality, Zachary. Your father built a $53 million company on $38 million of my money and never bothered to diversify his funding sources. That's not my fault. That's his. Silence on the line. Then quieter. Why didn't you tell me? About the money. About Dorothy. About any of it. I walked to the window, pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Because I wanted to know if you'd love me without it. If your family would accept me without it. I wanted to know if any of this was real. It was real. God, Sophia, I love you. Do you? I felt something crack in my chest. What's my mother's favorite flower, Zachary? Silence. What's the scar on my shoulder from? What was my childhood dog's name? What's my favorite book? More silence. Longer this time. You don't know, I said softly. You never bothered to learn. For 5 years, you've been married to an idea of me, the grateful girl from nowhere who made you feel generous. But you never bothered to know the actual me. That's not fair. You looked down at your plate tonight while your father humiliated me. You've done it 100 times. 1,000 times. Every Sunday dinner, every family gathering, every moment that mattered. You chose their approval over my dignity. That's not love, Zachary. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. I heard him crying on the other end. Actual sobs. In 5 years of marriage, I'd never heard him cry. I'm sorry, he choked out. God, Sophia, I'm so sorry. I see it now. I see what we did. What I did. Please. Please give me a chance to fix it. There's nothing to fix, I said. This is just the truth finally being visible. Your family's business is failing because it was built on borrowed ground. Our marriage is ending because it was built on borrowed respect. Neither of those things is my responsibility to save. What about the employees? His voice turned desperate, grasping. Parker Group has 73 employees. People with families. Mortgages. Kids in college. They're going to lose their jobs because of what you did. No, I cut him off. They're going to lose their jobs because your father mismanaged his company. Because he over-leveraged his assets and undercapitalized his reserves. Because he built an empire on someone else's foundation and called it success. Don't you dare put that on me. But you could fix it. You could reinvest. Just enough to keep us afloat through restructuring. Why would I do that? Because. He struggled for words. Because we're family. Because you loved me once. Because it's the right thing to do. I laughed. It came out bitter and broken. The right thing to do. The right thing would have been treating me with basic human respect for the past 5 years. The right thing would have been your father listening when I tried to help instead of laughing in my face. The right thing would have been you defending me. Just once. Just one time standing up and saying, don't talk to my wife like that. But you never did. None of you did. Sophia, please. My lawyer will send the divorce papers, I said. You can keep everything that's legally yours. I don't want any of it. Don't do this. It's already done, Zachary. It was done the moment you sat there and said nothing while your father called my concerns little handouts. It was done the moment you chose them over me for the 1,000th time. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. I ended the call. Turned off my phone. Sat down on my second-hand couch in my $800 apartment and stared at the wall. The tea had gone cold in my hands. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars passing. Sirens in the distance. Someone's music thumping through thin walls. The sounds of people living their ordinary lives, unaware that a few miles away an empire was crumbling. I thought about Adam Parker sitting in that emergency board meeting, watching his life's work collapse in real time. I thought about Vivian probably already calling her friends, trying to control the narrative before it got out. I thought about Emma and Noah scrambling to figure out how this affected their trust funds, their futures. I thought about Zachary, who just lost both his family's business and his wife in the same night. I waited for guilt to come. For regret. For the hollow feeling Dorothy used to warn me about. The emptiness that comes after revenge when you realize victory doesn't fill the hole that hurt left behind. But I didn't feel empty. I felt like I could finally breathe. My phone was off, but I could imagine the messages piling up. The voicemails. The desperate attempts to negotiate, to bargain, to make me responsible for fixing what I hadn't broken. I didn't turn it back on. Instead, I finished my cold tea, went to my bedroom and lay down fully clothed on top of the covers. Stared at the ceiling with its water stain in the corner that looked like a map of Italy. In the morning I'd call my lawyer. I'd start divorce proceedings. I'd begin the legal process of permanently separating my life from the Parkers. But tonight I just lay there in the dark, listening to the city outside my window and let myself be free. I woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment I didn't remember where I was. Then it came back. The apartment in Montrose, the one I'd kept secret, the place that was mine alone. I'd slept in my clothes. My makeup was smeared across the pillow. My phone was still off, sitting on the nightstand like a dead thing. It was Monday morning. The Parker Group would be filing for bankruptcy protection today. I got up, showered, changed into jeans and a sweater. Clothes I never wore to family dinners, clothes that were comfortable instead of carefully chosen. I made coffee in my small kitchen and stood at the window watching the neighborhood wake up. A man walking his dog. A woman in scrubs heading to her car for an early shift. Normal people living normal lives. I turned on my phone. 43 missed calls. 27 voicemails. 61 text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I called Teresa Vance, the lawyer Dorothy had recommended to me years ago. Teresa specialized in high-net-worth divorces. Dorothy had introduced us at a lunch meeting 3 years before she died, saying simply, "Just in case you ever need her." Dorothy had seen this coming. Somehow she'd known. Teresa answered on the second ring. "Sophia. I was wondering when you'd call." "You heard." "Honey, half of Houston has heard by now. Parker Group filing for bankruptcy makes the business section. The daughter-in-law who pulled the funding makes the gossip columns." She paused. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I need to file for divorce. Come to my office. 2 o'clock. Bring any financial documents you have, though from what I understand, you won't be asking for much. I don't want anything from him. We'll discuss it. 2 o'clock. She hung up before I could argue. My phone buzzed with a new call. My mother. I'd been avoiding her since last night, knowing she'd see it on the news, knowing she'd worry. I answered. "Sophia Maria Reeves." Her voice was tight with concern. "Are you going to tell me what's happening, or am I supposed to learn about my daughter's life from Channel 11 News?" "Mama. They're saying you destroyed the Parker Company. They're saying you've been secretly wealthy this whole time. They're saying," her voice caught. "Baby, are you safe? Are you okay?" Something in my chest loosened. After everything, the Parkers, the lies, the performance of being someone I wasn't, my mother's first question wasn't about the money or the scandal. It was whether I was safe. "I'm okay, Mama. I promise. Can I come over? I need to explain." "You better. I'll make coffee." My mother's apartment was in the same complex where I'd grown up. Different unit, but the same peeling paint and chain-link fences and smell of someone's laundry detergent mixing with exhaust from the freeway. She opened the door before I could knock, pulled me inside, wrapped her arms around me so tight I could barely breathe. "Tell me," she said. So I did. I told her everything. About Dorothy, about the inheritance, about keeping it secret, about 5 years of Sunday dinners where I'd made myself smaller and smaller. About last night. About walking away. She listened without interrupting, the way she always had. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she reached over and took my hand. "Baby, why didn't you tell me? About the money? I was afraid you'd see me differently. That you'd think I'd changed. That I wasn't your daughter anymore." "Sophia." Her voice was firm. "Money doesn't change who you are. It just shows people what they already were. You're still the girl who used to help me count change for groceries. You're still the daughter who called me every Sunday even after you married into that fancy family. Nothing changes that. I destroyed their business, Mama." "Good." She said it without hesitation. "They had 5 years to treat you right. They chose not to. That's not your fault, baby. That's theirs." I felt tears coming and didn't stop them. My mother pulled me close again, and I cried into her shoulder the way I hadn't since I was a child. "What now?" she asked finally. "Divorce. Starting over. Building something that matters instead of propping up something that never valued me." She nodded. "Your grandmother would be proud. My mama didn't take nothing from nobody neither." I laughed through the tears. Dorothy said the same thing. Smart woman, that Dorothy. Mama stood up, pulled me toward the kitchen. "Come on. You need to eat. You're too skinny. That family never fed you right." At Teresa's office that afternoon, I signed papers. Petition for divorce. Asset disclosure forms. A statement of separation. "Zachary's going to fight this," Teresa said, tapping her pen against the desk. "Not because he loves you, though he'll claim that. Because he's terrified that if you divorce him, there's 0 chance of you reinvesting in Parker Group. Let him fight. I'm not changing my mind." "Good." Teresa smiled. "Now about the settlement. Texas is a community property state. Technically, you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. I don't want any of it. Sophia. I don't want his condo or his car or his investment accounts. I don't want anything that ties me to him or his family. I just want out." Teresa studied me for a long moment. "All right. But we're putting protections in place. He doesn't get to claim any of your premarital assets. No claim on your consulting business or any of your investment vehicles. And no future earnings. Whatever you build after this, he has 0 stake in it." "Fine. And one more thing." Teresa leaned forward. They're going to come after you. Not just legally, though Adam will probably try. But socially. They'll leak stories. They'll paint you as the villain. The manipulative gold digger who conned their way into the family and destroyed them. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. About the country club crowd, about the charity circuit, about all the people who'd smiled at me at events while wondering how someone like me had ended up with someone like Zachary. Let them talk, I said. I'm done performing for people who were never going to accept me anyway. My phone rang as I was leaving Teresa's office. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sophia Reeves? Yes. This is Jennifer Walsh with the Houston Chronicle. I'm writing a story about Parker Group's bankruptcy filing. I was hoping to get a comment from you about your decision to withdraw your investment. I stopped walking. How did you get this number? Public records. Your consulting firm is listed as a subsidiary of Whitmore Capital Holdings. I'm just doing my job, Ms. Reeves. Do you have any comment on the bankruptcy? I should have hung up. Teresa would have told me to hang up. But something in me, the girl from Corpus Christi who'd learned to be invisible, who'd spent 5 years being dismissed, wanted to be heard. Parker Group's financial difficulties stem from over-leveraging their assets and poor capital management, I said. As an investor, I exercised my legal right to withdraw my capital when I determined the company was no longer a sound investment. That's standard business practice. If you want to know why they're filing for bankruptcy, you should ask their CEO why he built a $53 million company on someone else's foundation and never bothered to diversify his funding sources. Silence on the other end. Then, can I quote you on that? Every word. I hung up. Teresa was going to kill me. But I didn't care. I'd been silent for 5 years. I'd made myself small and quiet and invisible. I was done being invisible. I drove back to my apartment as the sun set, painting the Houston sky in oranges and purples. My phone kept ringing. More journalists probably, or maybe the Parkers trying different numbers. I turned it off again. Inside my apartment I made dinner. Real dinner, not the elaborate meals Vivian's chef prepared. Just pasta with olive oil and garlic, the kind of thing my mother used to make when money was tight. I ate alone at my small table looking out at the city lights. And for the first time in 5 years I felt like myself. The pasta tasted like nothing, but I finished it anyway. Washed the dish. Dried it. Put it back in the cabinet. Small, deliberate actions that felt like reclaiming normalcy. My phone buzzed on the counter. I turned it back on after talking to my mother, and now it wouldn't stop. Another voicemail. Another text. The world demanding explanations, reactions, statements. I ignored all of it except one name. Marcus. His text was brief. Asterisk, call me when you can. Not urgent but important. Asterisk. I called. Sophia. His voice was different than it had been this morning. Heavier. I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it. I sat down at my small kitchen table. What happened? Zachary showed up at my office 2 hours ago. My stomach dropped. How did he even know where? He hired a private investigator. Found out I manage your portfolio. He wanted to meet face to face. Marcus paused. He offered me $2 million to convince you to reinvest in Parker Group. Just enough to keep them afloat through restructuring. I closed my eyes. What did you say? I told him to leave before I called security. But Sophia, he's not going to stop. He's desperate. They all are. Another pause. There's something else. Adam's lawyer sent a letter this afternoon. They're threatening to sue you for, and I quote, tortious interference with business relationships and breach of fiduciary duty. That's absurd. I had every legal right. I know. My lawyers know. Their lawyers probably know too. But they're going to make noise anyway. They're going to try to paint you as the villain, drag this out, make it expensive and exhausting until you cave and give them something. I stared at the wall of my tiny kitchen. The paint was chipped near the window frame. I'd never bothered to fix it. Let them try. Sophia. I'm not caving, Marcus. I'm not giving them a cent. If they want to sue me, they can sue me. If they want to drag my name through the mud, they can try. But I'm not going back to being invisible just because it makes them more comfortable. Silence on the other end. Then softer. Dorothy taught you well. She did. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sound of my neighbor's television through the wall. This place, This modest, unremarkable apartment was mine. No marble floors. No crystal chandeliers. No performance required. I thought about Zachary showing up at Marcus's office with a briefcase full of desperation. $2 million. As if money could fix what had broken between us. As if the problem had ever been about money at all. The problem was that he'd never seen me. None of them had. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ms. Reeves. A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Catherine Walsh with Houston Society magazine. We're running a feature on the Parker Group situation, and we'd love to get your perspective. No comment. We've spoken with several sources close to the family who've painted a rather unflattering picture of your actions. Don't you think you deserve a chance to tell your side? I almost hung up. Then I thought about 5 years of staying quiet, of making myself small, of letting them control the narrative. You want my side? I said. Here it is. I was a silent investor who exercised my legal right to withdraw capital from a poorly managed company. If Parker Group can't survive without one investor, that's a structural problem, not a personal vendetta. And if your sources close to the family are calling me manipulative for keeping my wealth private, ask them why they assumed I had nothing in the first place. Ask them why they needed me to be poor to feel superior. I heard typing on the other end. Can I quote you? Every word. I hung up before she could ask anything else. Teresa was definitely going to kill me now. But something had shifted. I was tired of being quiet. Tired of other people writing my story while I nodded and smiled and accepted their version of events. The next morning, I woke to find my quote had made it into the online edition of Houston Society. The article was surprisingly fair. They'd included statements from sources close to the Parker family calling me a gold digger and social climber. But they'd also included financial analysis showing that Parker Group had been overleveraged for years. The comments section was brutal. Half the people called me a heartless monster for destroying a family business. The other half called me a genius for exposing entitled rich people who'd built their empire on borrowed money. I read 3 comments and then closed the browser. Other people's opinions of me had controlled too much of my life already. My phone rang. Zachary. This time I answered. Sophia, please. Just 5 minutes. Face to face. That's all I'm asking. I should have said no. But something in his voice, not the desperation but something underneath it, made me hesitate. 1 coffee, I said. Public place. 30 minutes. Thank you. God, thank you. This doesn't change anything, Zachary. I'm still filing for divorce. I'm still not reinvesting. But if you want to talk, we can talk. Once. We met at a coffee shop in Montrose, the kind of place the Parkers would never set foot in. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, a menu board with prices in chalk. Zachary looked terrible when he walked in. Unshaven, his expensive shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He sat across from me and for a long moment neither of us spoke. I'm not here to ask you to save the company, he said finally. I know that's done. The bankruptcy is going through. Dad's losing the house. We're all starting over. He looked up at me. I'm here because I owe you an apology. A real one. I waited. I didn't see you, he said, his voice cracking. For 5 years I didn't see you. I saw the version I wanted. The woman from humble beginnings who'd be grateful for my family's world, who'd make me feel like a good person for loving you. But I never saw who you actually were. I never asked the right questions. I never defended you when it mattered. He wiped his eyes. You asked me what your mother's favorite flower was. I still don't know. I should know. I should know everything about you. But I was too busy trying to turn you into who I wanted you to be. I felt something crack in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never, but recognition. This was real. This was the man I'd thought I was marrying before his family got to him, before he chose them over me again and again. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. I think it's the most honest you've ever been with me. Does it change anything? I shook my head. I can't unlive 5 years of being invisible. I can't unfeel what it was like to sit at that table and have your father mock me while you said nothing. The damage is done, Zachary. He nodded slowly. I know. I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. What we all did. We sat there for a while longer, 2 people who'd been married for 5 years and had somehow never really known each other at all. For what it's worth, he said as he stood to leave, I think Dorothy would be proud of you. Not for destroying us, though we probably deserved it, but for refusing to disappear. For claiming your worth even when it cost you everything. After he left, I sat alone with my coffee going cold, watching people come and go. A young couple laughing over shared pastries. An older woman reading a paperback novel. A man working on a laptop, headphones blocking out the world. Normal people. Living normal lives. Not performing for anyone. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Started typing. The Whitmore Initiative. A foundation providing capital and mentorship to women entrepreneurs from working-class backgrounds. No charity. No condescension. Just investment in people who've been invisible too long. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I called Marcus. I want to start a foundation, I said. I want to use Dorothy's money, my money, to do what she did for me. Find brilliant women who've been overlooked and give them real opportunities. That's a beautiful idea, Marcus said. How much are you thinking? 5 million to start. More as we grow. I'll start drawing up the paperwork. I hung up and looked around the coffee shop. At the art on the walls made by local artists who'd probably never set foot in a gallery. At the mismatched chairs someone had rescued and refinished. At the menu board with its hand-drawn letters. This was real. This was the world I'd come from. The world I'd never really left, even when I tried to fit into the Parkers' marble palace. I was going home. Not to Corpus Christi but to myself. And for the first time since that dinner table revelation I smiled. The smile faded as I walked back to my apartment, but the lightness remained. I had a direction now. A purpose that was mine, not borrowed from someone else's expectations. The Whitmore Initiative. Dorothy would have loved the name. Over the next week I threw myself into planning. Marcus connected me with lawyers who specialized in nonprofit formation. I drafted mission statements at my kitchen table, revised them again. I wanted the language to be perfect. Not corporate speak but something that would resonate with women like me, women who'd been told they weren't enough. The divorce papers were filed on a Thursday. Teresa called me that afternoon with an edge in her voice. Zachary's fighting it. On what grounds? He's not contesting the divorce itself, but he's making it complicated. His lawyer is asking for extensions, requesting additional financial disclosures, demanding mediation sessions. She paused. Sophia, he's stalling. And I think I know why. Tell me. His lawyer keeps bringing up the possibility of reconciliation. They're offering you things, half the condo, alimony, though God knows that's laughable given your wealth. But every offer comes with a caveat. They want you to consider reinvesting some capital in Parker Group. Just enough to keep them afloat through restructuring. I closed my eyes. How much? 15 million. No. I know. But they're going to drag this out as long as they can, hoping you'll get tired of the fight and give them something just to make it stop. Teresa's voice softened. Sophia, you need to prepare yourself. This could take months. Maybe longer. And it's going to get ugly. Let it get ugly. I'm not giving them a cent. Good. I'll tell their lawyer we're not interested in any negotiations that involve your capital. Divorce only, no business entanglements. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the wall. $15 million. To them it was a lifeline. To me it was the cost of my dignity for 5 years and they still thought I owed them. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Emma. We need to talk. Asterisk. I should have deleted it. Should have blocked the number. Instead I typed, no we don't. 3 dots appeared. Then, asterisk, you're destroying my family. My parents might lose their home. My father worked his entire life to build that company. You're throwing it away out of spite. Asterisk. I stared at those words. The entitlement. The complete inability to see that they'd done this to themselves. I typed back. Asterisk, your father built his company on my capital and never bothered to tell me. He dismissed my warnings about the structural problems. He mocked me at his dinner table while you all laughed. I don't owe your family anything. If you're looking for someone to blame, look at your father, not at me. Asterisk. I blocked the number before she could respond. 2 days later, Zachary showed up at my apartment. It was late, past 11. I looked through the peephole and almost didn't open the door. He looked terrible. Unshaven, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and desperation. But something in his posture stopped me from walking away. The Parker confidence was gone. He looked broken in a way I'd never seen before. I opened the door but left the chain on. "Zachary, it's late. Please," he said. "5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Then I'll leave and never bother you again." Against every instinct I let him in. He stood in my living room looking around like he'd never really seen it before. And he hadn't, I realized. In 5 years of marriage he'd been here maybe 3 times, always briefly, always acting like he was visiting some quaint curiosity rather than a place that mattered to me. "This is nice," he said quietly. "Cozy. It's very you." I didn't respond. Didn't offer him a seat. Just waited. He sat anyway on the edge of my second-hand couch, his hands clasped between his knees like a penitent in church. "I'm not here to ask you to save Parker Group," he said. "I know that's done. The bankruptcy is going through. Dad's losing the house. The lawyers are already negotiating with creditors. We're all starting over from nothing. Then why are you here?" He looked up at me and his eyes were red-rimmed and wet. "Because I need to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not the kind where I'm trying to manipulate you into changing your mind. The kind where I finally understand what I did and I need you to know that I see it." I sat down in the chair across from him. Waited. "I didn't see you," he said, his voice cracking. "For 5 years I didn't see you. I saw this version I'd created. The woman from humble beginnings who'd be grateful for my family's world, who'd make me feel generous and enlightened for loving her. But that wasn't you. That was never you." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "You asked me what your mother's favorite flower was and I didn't know. I still don't know. You asked about your father's hospice and I couldn't remember, even though I stood at his funeral and gave a speech about family and love and all this stuff I didn't actually understand. Zachary. Let me finish. Please." He took a shaky breath. "I never defended you because defending you would have meant challenging my father. And I've spent my entire life terrified of challenging him. Terrified of disappointing him. Terrified of losing his approval." He laughed, bitter and broken. "And now I've lost everything anyway. The company, the respect, probably my relationship with my family once they realize I'm not going to keep begging you to save them." "You're not." He shook his head. "I told Dad yesterday that I was done. That if he wanted to blame someone for Parker Group failing he should look in the mirror, not at you. He hasn't spoken to me since." He looked at me directly. "I should have said that 5 years ago. I should have defended you every single time. I should have told them that mocking you was unacceptable, that dismissing you was cruel, that you deserved better than the way they treated you." I felt something crack in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never. But recognition. This was real. This was the man I'd thought I was marrying before his family had shaped him into someone else. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you finally seeing this now?" "Because losing everything made me realize what actually mattered. And what mattered, what should have always mattered, was you. Actually, not the version I wanted you to be." He stood up slowly. "I know it's too late. I know I destroyed what we had by choosing them over you again and again. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. What we all did. And I'm sorry." We stood there in my small living room, 2 people who'd been married for 5 years and had somehow never really known each other. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I think it's the most honest you've ever been with me. Does it change anything?" I shook my head. "I can't unlive 5 years of being invisible. I can't unfeel what it was like to have your father mock me while you sat there and said nothing. The damage is done, Zachary. We can't go back." He nodded. "I know." He walked toward the door then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think Dorothy would be proud of you. Not for destroying us, though we probably deserved it, but for refusing to disappear. For refusing to let us make you small." After he left, I sat in the dark for a long time processing. Maybe that was the closure I needed. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. He'd finally seen me. 5 years too late, but he'd seen me. My phone buzzed with an email from Marcus. The Whitmore Initiative paperwork was ready for my signature. $5 million in initial funding. A board of directors that included Teresa, Marcus, and 3 other people who understood what it meant to build something from nothing. I opened my laptop and signed the digital documents. Every signature felt like a choice. Not to dwell on what had been broken but to build something new from the pieces. The next morning I woke up to a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, young and uncertain. "Ms. Reeves? My name is Maya Cortez. I saw an article about the Whitmore Initiative and I have a business plan. For a financial literacy program for low-income communities. I've been turned down by 17 investors but I thought maybe you'd be willing to look at it." I saved the voicemail. Called her back within an hour. "Maya," I said when she answered, breathless and hopeful. "Tell me about your program." And just like that, the foundation I'd imagined started becoming real. Maya talked for 45 minutes straight, barely pausing for breath. Her business plan was meticulous. Financial projections, market analysis, implementation timelines. But what struck me wasn't the spreadsheets. It was the passion in her voice when she talked about the families she wanted to help. "My mom still keeps her cash in a coffee can in the freezer," she said. "She doesn't trust banks. Doesn't understand how credit works. When my abuela got sick and the hospital bills came, my mom tried to negotiate with a check cashing place that charged 30% interest because she didn't know there were other options." I knew that story. I'd lived that story. "How much do you need?" I asked. I was hoping for $50,000 to start. Enough to hire 2 teachers, rent space in community centers, develop curriculum. "I'll give you $200,000. Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sorry, did you say?" $200,000. Plus 6 months of mentorship. I want weekly meetings. I want to see your books, your metrics, your growth strategy. And I want you to think bigger than 5 cities. Think 15. Think 50. "Ms. Reeves, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. And call me Sophia." 6 months later, I stood in a renovated warehouse on Austin's east side, watching Maya present to a room full of women I'd never met but already understood. The space had been a textile factory in the 1950s, then sat abandoned for 30 years before I bought it. Marcus had questioned the purchase. "It's going to cost $500,000 to renovate." But the moment I'd walked through those huge industrial doors, I'd known it was perfect. Exposed brick walls. High ceilings with original wooden beams. Floor-to-ceiling windows that let in Texas sunlight. We'd kept the character but added modern touches. Sleek desks, fast internet, a kitchen that actually worked. But the most important part wasn't the building. It was the women filling it. 23 of them on opening day. All from backgrounds like mine. Women who'd grown up counting pennies, who'd fought for every scholarship and every opportunity, who'd been told they weren't enough because they didn't have the right last name or the right connections. Women who were brilliant and driven and tired of being invisible. The Whitmore Initiative. Dorothy would have loved the name. Would have loved this. Women helping women, capital flowing to people who actually understood struggle, mentorship without condescension. Maya finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause. Her program was now operating in 8 cities, teaching financial literacy to 12,000 families. Traditional investors who'd initially passed were calling her now, trying to get in on the second funding round. "You made them see me," she told me last week over coffee. "You didn't just give me money. You made me visible." I'd cried when she said that. Real, messy tears in a Starbucks on Congress Avenue. Because that was the point. That had always been the point. After the presentations ended, I stood by the windows watching the Austin skyline catch the evening light. A hand touched my shoulder. Teresa Vance, my lawyer, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing me one. "Your divorce finalized today, by the way." Zachary signed without contesting anything. I took a sip. The wine was good, not Parker family expensive but good. "How is he?" "According to my sources, working at a small investment firm in Dallas. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Going to therapy twice a week." Teresa studied me. "You're allowed to feel something about that, you know. Even if it's just relief." "I feel quiet about it," I said. "Not happy, not sad. Just ready to close that chapter." "And the others?" I'd followed the news from a distance, piecing together the aftermath of that November dinner from business filings and occasional updates from Marcus. Parker Group's bankruptcy had finalized 4 months after I walked out. Adam had lost the house, the cars, most of his personal wealth. He was still comfortable by normal standards. Retirement accounts the creditors couldn't touch, a smaller home in a less prestigious neighborhood, but the empire was gone. Vivian had filed for divorce. She'd stood by him through the business collapse, but when she discovered he'd been hiding the extent of their financial exposure from her, something broke. She got the remaining assets in the settlement and moved to Santa Fe. I'd heard she was teaching yoga now, of all things. Emma and Noah both found jobs at other commercial real estate firms, starting at the bottom, learning what it meant to work without their father's name as a shield. And Zachary sent me updates occasionally. Short messages I rarely responded to. He'd gotten a job at a small investment firm. He was in therapy. He was trying to understand how he'd become someone he didn't recognize. I appreciated the updates, but I never responded with more than, "Glad you're doing better." That door was closed. "I don't think about them much anymore," I told Teresa honestly. "Sometimes I wonder if Adam learned anything. If any of them did. But mostly I'm just busy building this." She raised her glass. "To building something that matters." We clinked glasses and drank. The next 2 years blurred together in the best way. The Whitmore initiative grew faster than I'd imagined. 50 women funded. Then 100. Then 200. We expanded to Dallas, to San Antonio, to Houston. Women who'd been told they weren't smart enough, weren't connected enough, weren't enough. They were building businesses, creating jobs, changing their communities. I kept a file of their messages. Screenshots of texts and emails that I read when I needed reminding of why I'd walked away from the Parkers. Asterisk, you didn't just fund my business. You gave me permission to take up space. Asterisk, my daughter asked me yesterday if girls can be entrepreneurs. I got to say yes because of you. Asterisk, I've been invisible my whole life. Thank you for finally seeing me. That last one came from a woman named Jennifer who'd started a tech company teaching coding to kids in underserved schools. She'd been rejected by 47 investors before I said yes. Now she had contracts with school districts across 3 states. 2 years after that November dinner, I was invited to speak at a conference for women in finance. 300 women packed into a hotel ballroom in downtown Houston, most of them young, most of them hungry in the way I recognized. The organizer had asked me to talk about my journey. From poverty to wealth, from invisible to investor, she'd said. It's an inspiring story. But standing on that stage, looking out at all those faces, I realized I didn't want to tell an inspiring story. I wanted to tell a true one. I spent 5 years of my life trying to earn respect from people who'd decided I didn't deserve it, I said. I made myself smaller, quieter, less visible. I thought if I could just prove I was smart enough, valuable enough, worthy enough, they'd finally see me. I paused, letting that sink in. But that's not how respect works. Respect isn't earned from people who've already decided you don't matter. It's claimed by refusing to accept their verdict. I told them about Dorothy. About the inheritance. About the Parkers and their Sunday dinners and the moment I finally stopped performing. People think the revenge was destroying their business, I said. It wasn't. The revenge was in refusing to stay invisible. In building something that mattered to me instead of propping up something that would never value me. In choosing myself when everyone else expected me to choose them. The applause was thunderous. But what mattered more were the women who found me afterward. Who said, I needed to hear that. Who said, I've been making myself invisible too. Who said, thank you for showing me it's okay to walk away. One young woman, barely 25, grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes. My boyfriend's family treats me like you described. I thought I was being too sensitive. You're not, I told her. And you deserve better. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I think I'm going to leave. Good, I said. Build something beautiful from what comes next. Driving home that night, I took a detour past the old Parker estate. Someone else owned it now. The bankruptcy sale had happened months ago. The new owners had planted different flowers, painted the trim a different color. It looked smaller than I remembered. Less imposing. Just a house. I didn't stop. Just drove past, noting the change and kept going. My apartment in Montrose was dark when I got home. I'd bought the building last year, converted it into affordable housing for women in the Whitmore initiative. I lived in the same modest 2-bedroom I'd always had. My mother thought I was crazy. You have millions of dollars and you live like a college student, she'd said last week. I live like myself, I'd corrected her. I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched the city lights spread out below me. Somewhere out there, Maya was probably still working on her financial literacy program. Jennifer was probably coding late into the night. 200 women were building businesses, raising families, taking up space in a world that had tried to make them small. And somewhere, maybe, a young woman was sitting at a dinner table being dismissed by people who thought they were better than her. Maybe she'd stay silent. Maybe she'd make herself small. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd remember that her worth wasn't determined by who saw it. Maybe she'd be brave enough to claim it. Even when it cost everything. Because some foundations are meant to fall. And some women are meant to build something better from the rubble. I'd built mine. And I'd never been more visible or more free in my life. If this story of standing up for yourself had you holding your breath, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Sophia calmly sent that text message knowing their entire empire would crumble in 12 minutes. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.